My name's Jeff Bajorek, and my career in sales has been a hell of a ride. And I want to bring you along with me. If you prefer to sell things at a premium, if you never want to win a deal on price, rethink the way you sell. Welcome back to the show. My name's Jeff Bajorek. I'm your host, and I'm here to help you rethink the way you sell. This season has been largely about intangibles, the intangibles that separate top performers from everybody else. Mike Hook is the vice president of sales at Childcare CRM, and he wrote a post on LinkedIn that caught my eye about intangibles. And his intangibles are a little different than mine, and I think there is a ton of value that can be gleaned from talking about these intangibles. So I grabbed him. I said, look, let's talk about this. Let's talk a little more about this and what you mean by these. And what came out of this conversation was just gold. And so we're going to talk about his intangibles. We're going to talk about the value of stepping away. We're going to talk about a concept he calls the steel man as opposed to the straw man. And I think you're going to take a lot away from this conversation. So I'm not going to hold you any longer. Let's get into it.
There's a dirty little secret for how high-performing individuals get things done. A LinkedIn post written by Mike Hook, read by Doug Branson. There's a dirty little secret for how high-performing individuals get things done. Anyone can do it. Here's how. Number 1, set your ego aside to ask questions around the things you don't know. Think big picture and get info from positions that agree and disagree with you. Number 2, be confident and own your stance. Have conviction. If you think for yourself and have a strong position, fight for it. And don't back down simply because someone disagrees. Number 3, humility to change and admit when you're wrong. No one is right all the time, and new information can and should alter our stance. Be willing to change and think about getting it right versus being right. Number 4, live what you speak. If you say you're going to do something, you get it done. Accountability plus reliability on a consistent basis. Number 5, over-prepare. Have an A, B, and C plan and know all the info. This will make you unflappable when things don't go as planned, and they never do. Number 6, have grit. Life is hard, and all great things come from doing what's hard. High performers can push through the hard times and have the resiliency to come out the other side, not unscathed, more experienced. And here is the big one. Number 7, they default to action, especially in the face of fear. Life and its experiences are our greatest teacher, and rarely are people 100% ready when they get the call. All you need to do is start. Action compounds into confidence. Everyone can start doing these things today. It's hard work. Are you willing?
Mike, that was a hell of a piece on LinkedIn. Your stuff doesn't always pop up in front of me, but the algorithm puts you in front of me more than most. And I read a lot of your stuff, but this one stuck out to me. What inspired you to create this short list?
So we were talking beforehand. I was on the road and I was traveling around a little bit. I did this 5 cities in 10-day stint, visiting family and friends and being out of the office. And as I was doing that, I was having some conversations with other leaders in my space. I was doing a lot of thinking about, who do I want to work with? Why do I like working with them? What have I focused on in my career that's been really impactful, that set me ahead? Who are the people that I look up to, and what type of things do they do? And what have I seen in my own world play out? And so as I started thinking about this, there were some commonalities that kept coming up for me, not only in people who I've seen be successful, but people that I like working with and things that I've done myself. So it was kind of a melting pot of like, hey, let me get out and about so I can have time to think about, well, what are all the things that are going on right now? And how are they sort of manifesting? And what do I want to do next year? And who do I want to be around in the next calendar year? And this came out of that.
That's so cool. I mean, we did talk about your travel and just a change of scenery and how that can kind of spur creativity, or at the very least give you the space to do some free thinking, right? And to do some of that deep work that I think you see it talked about more and more, that, you need to give yourself some space. You need to be able to, be distraction free. You have to kind of break the monotony a little bit, but it's so hard to break the mold of those traditional boundaries and those traditional hierarchies and structures, because they've just been a part of us for so long. They've been the examples that we've, looked up to. And, for you to not only give yourself the space, but then to be able to distill why you think you're successful, or why you believe that the habits that you have instilled and the disciplines that you've held yourself to that have led to, your success. There's a lot of people who can't do that, Mike. I hope you know that. There's just a lot of people who just don't get it on that level. But, to sit down and most people say, you know what, I work really hard. I don't say no to very many people, and I'm always up for a challenge. Let's go, baby. Let's hustle. And it's like, there's so little, there's negative wisdom in that, right? It is the opposite of helpful. How often do you think about this stuff?
I would say for me, not enough even. So one of the things that I started doing this year, and look, I think every single person is a victim to routine in most cases. So you say it's really hard to break away. Well, guess what? I fall victim to the same thing, where it's like, okay, I'm in my weekly cadence with the sales team. I'm doing my, things with the company. We're sitting down and I'm doing my outside office thing, where it's like, great, 5 days a week. It's like, let's go do X in the morning. Let's do Y in the afternoon. And it's like, you get into this habitual thing where it's very comfortable and it's very easy. And sometimes doing that, which is, necessary in a lot of cases, sometimes doing that removes the space to really reflect and think back. And it's interesting, we're sitting here right now, December 14th, a huge moment for reflection for everybody, because things slow down, because we take time away, because, we are just by nature having more conversations with friends and family and thinking about these things in a broader picture, right? What went well this year? What am I really excited about and planning for the future? So December is a natural time to do all that. I think if I could, in a perfect world, I would spend time weekly thinking about this stuff. What it really breaks down to is I probably get a good session in once a month. And where I've done it the most recently is like the last 4 months in a row, I decided to, at the end of the month and the turn of the next month, to go to the spa. So I'll go get a massage. I'll go to the sauna. I'll do that. And I'll spend 4 hours there on a Saturday. That's become my time for a lot of this thinking, just because I'm away from everything. I'm disconnected. It's a really good spot for me to relax. I'd still like to do it more though.
Well, and then you run into, and regardless of how invalid this is, you run into, wait a second, you're the VP of sales and you're going to the spa every week. Why aren't you working harder, Mike? Right? It's, there's the fear of that, kind of being the case. And, for whatever reason, and, look, you're from Ohio, I'm from Michigan. I mean, we're Rust Belt kids, right? You get paid for the time you put in, not for the results that you create. That's kind of the environment, at least societally, locally, that we grew up in. We also both very know that to be untrue. We really know that is the opposite of that is true. In the roles that we perform right now, we are very much paid for our expertise. We are very much paid for our strategic decisions. We are very much paid for the results that we are enabling and the results that we are helping to create. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. And the tough pill for many people in our positions to swallow is that sometimes you need to get away from everybody in order to do your best work for those people. And it's just, It's such a tough mold to break.
Well, and I think about this, right? Even going back to the post itself. And when I talk about things like having conviction, well, having conviction as a leader, a lot of times means you're going to make decisions that the majority doesn't like, even if you know it's true. And guess what? You're going to have to think through those thoughtfully, and you're going to have to defend those positions, and you're going to have to get people to buy in. And for some cases, like when you're stepping into a new organization in some type of senior executive leadership role, and you're trying to change the culture, some of that conviction can show up in firing people who are namesakes and who were early employees at a company you stepped into, and managing that. That is not easy to do. And you having that conviction to do those things does not come easily. And you have to really think through things. So, you're 100% right. It's, as I look back, and even when I think about like the decisions my CEO makes versus the decisions that I make, I'll make more decisions in a year than my CEO. His decisions are still higher leverage than mine. So there should be more thought behind them. And my decisions are much more higher leverage than a manager's decisions, and certainly more than an individual contributor's. So I think if we keep that in mind as leaders, and if we keep that in mind on what we're bringing to our teams, like, yes, for a lot of us, myself, definitely, I found this, I need to remove myself from the scenario so that I don't feel the need to respond to the team or respond to something else or go to a place of reaction. I need to get out and about so that I can truly focus.
That's great perspective. That's great perspective, because you're not just removing yourself from the situation, you're eliminating potential distractions from continuing to rear their heads. You said here at the end, the big one, default to action. That feels like it could be potentially dangerous. Why is that the big one?
I think because if you do not act on something, you're 100% going to lose it. So when I talk about defaulting to action, for me, it doesn't mean carelessly moving forward. Like, default to action is not, oh my God, respond to this, let's go right away. Because that would really put you in this reactionary emotional state. And that, I think, can be really dangerous, especially when things come in where adversity is issued. But for defaulting to action, it's, okay, let's first consolidate the information we have, right? Then let's try to pull in any outside resources we have. Then let's make a decision. Let's move it. Let's test it. Let's reevaluate it, right? You can do all of that sometimes in 2 minutes if it's a small decision. Like I said, the bigger ones with higher leverage, you need to be more thoughtful about them. And then I think it was, a lot of stuff gets created to Jeff Bezos and Amazon. But I think one of the things I think about too is what he talked about with delegating and with decision-making. Is this reversible or not? So many of the decisions we make are reversible. So I would rather have someone go make a mistake, figure out what went wrong with it, reverse course and pivot. And unless it is really a mistake you can't walk back, then why not move quickly? And even if it is one of those big mistakes, at some point, you have to start chipping away at it. You can't just let it sit there. So for me, default to action. And then, in parentheses, right, especially in the face of fear. I don't think there are many things that are unknown to people or that could put them out in a bad light that they don't fear, that there isn't hesitation or pause or something in there that's saying, I know I need to do this, but it's way more comfortable for me not to. And breaking that mold is a game changer, especially in a startup culture where speed is so valuable.
Right. The status quo wins so often because of that and the hesitation to act. And when you throw more complex decisions in the fold and when you all of these little considerations that need to be made create more friction in the decision-making process. And, it was the day we met actually in person down in Dallas. I remember Mike Weinberg put through a slide up during this talk, and he's like, when the road ahead isn't clear, you tend to slow down. And that has stuck with me for the second half of this year. And just the idea that the more friction you create, the more barriers you put up in front of you, the more reasons you give for people to not make a decision, the fewer decisions they're going to make. And that goes for salespeople, it goes for sales leaders, it goes for executives, it goes for C-level. Do you have that clarity? And that clarity gets muddy when the voices in your head get louder. And so when you just say, look, you kind of decide ahead of time, I'm going to have a bias toward action. I know that there are very few decisions that I can make with good intentions that cannot be walked back with even better intentions. And so that split second, okay, what can happen? Okay. I mean, something happened earlier today. I don't think very many people saw it because I caught it pretty quickly. But I had written something. I was working on something. And I said, I'm going to post part of this to LinkedIn. We'll see what happens. And I was ready to press send. I was like, I don't know if I love this. But best case scenario, it's really good marketing and I can start some conversations with it. Not so great scenario, it's taken totally out of context. It's bad and some people get mad at me. Absolute worst case, I hit delete. And you know what? I pulled it down because I got something wrong. Some people called me out on it, which is to their credit. And then as I was trying to justify it and work it out on my own, I said, you know what? I need to pull this down. And it didn't take that long, so there weren't even that many people who saw it. And I think what's really interesting in the silver lining to all this, if you want to call it that, because of how I had to defend it to people, it made me consider the words I used, the premise I had, and where I was going with this. And that is exactly the jolt that I needed to come back, further crystallize and, really steal my own thoughts and come back with something that's going to be much more impactful, going to make a much better statement and ultimately help more people. And that's a win in the end, and I don't think that there are enough people who recognize that the little mistakes and the times you stub your toe along the way ultimately lead to a better endpoint anyway.
Well, and so what I love about this too, what you did is it's that ability to admit when you're wrong when presented with new information. Like that's just really smart. And when you think about things that way, like, look, it's so overused. Like, I didn't fail. I either learned or I won, right? Like it's very overused. It's very cliche. It's like I'm kind of rolling my eyes over here as I say it. But I think the validity behind that is that it allows you to reevaluate what you're thinking about. And I recently, the other day, like this is really timely, was scrolling through Twitter and I saw someone talking about the steel man argument, which if you're not familiar about that, it's like taking your stance on something and then actually writing out the opposition. So really forcing yourself to look at something holistically to be like, hey, do I still believe this? Do I believe maybe parts of this and then forming a new opinion for that? Or is it like, wait, now that I've researched more on the opposition, this is really good. I don't think that we should or can do that in everything, but we can always do little parts of it, right? And I think you did that. You did your post, you had your stance, your steel man, if you will, came from outside responses and feedback. And it's like, okay, well, now I can really have these two opposing viewpoints here, realize maybe I wasn't right in what I was thinking initially. Okay, let's remove my stance here and come at it with a more holistic response. And that, to me, is like an all-time thing to do.
Well, and that's, I've said that about my writing and my podcasting and that it's like, I have to do that. And the thing that made me feel uneasy about the post itself is because I didn't think I did enough of that. But, when I'm writing and I'm ready to press publish, I'm thinking of anybody who's going to tear this up. Who is going to say something bad about this? Who can argue with this? And do I have a response for that? And if I feel like I have enough responses for enough arguments, I absolutely press send. I want to press send faster because I want that discussion because that's where everybody else gets better too. But I have to be really secure, and secure is not the right word. I have to be really confident in the words that I choose and the way that I put things so that they can withstand all that stuff. And I've said this, but I think I recorded an episode on this show about it a couple weeks ago. I don't think there's a tool that has made me any better at selling. I don't think there's a tool that has made me better at selling than my keyboard or this microphone. Just the idea that I have to get my thoughts down very clearly and publicly. And it's really made me think about things in a lot of ways. Mike, this was a great talk, man. We're a little over time, but it was worth every minute of it. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, Jeff, and I appreciate you having me on. This has been great. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mike Hook, and then you can find me on Twitter as well, at Mikey M. Hook. Those are the two places that I am outside of childcare CRM.
Awesome. And we'll have the link to your post, obviously, in the show notes there. So go drop a comment on it or use it as the fastest conduit to connecting with Mike. Hey, you've heard me say this before. You have a lot of choices as it relates to sales podcasts and leadership and growth podcasts. And I really appreciate you, if you're listening right now, if you're still listening right now, to appreciate you for spending your time with me and with Mike today. So we'll talk to you again real soon. What do you think? Quite a piece, huh? We're going to link to that piece in the show notes as well as to Mike's profile. And one of the things that came out of that really struck me is this balance between ego and humility. And you need to think highly enough of yourself that you believe that you can do what you are saying you can do. But at the same time, you need to be humble enough to recognize that you still have a long way to go. And you also need to be relatable too. That's pretty important, right? So think about that balance or that dichotomy if you choose to look at it that way. But I want you to think about the intangibles in your own career, in your own mind. Right. And sometimes, what's important to Mike is very similar to what's important to me, but, and there's certainly a lot of overlap, but we look at it differently and we think of these things in a different way. And you're going to think of it in a third way. The key here is that you start thinking. The key here is that you start to try to see yourself in these suggestions that are being brought to you via this podcast. That's the assignment. It's not just to listen to this and get through it as quickly as possible. It's to stop, take a few minutes, maybe write a few things down and think on it. It's worth it. When you're walking the dog, when you're just walking yourself, maybe when you're just sitting still, having a cup of coffee in the morning, just to get your mind right. So do that. Think about this stuff. I'd like to thank Mike Hook. Again, we're going to link to all his stuff. He's a great follow on LinkedIn as well as on Twitter. And I'd like to thank you, because I always like to thank you. I'm extremely grateful that you're spending this time with me. I'm extremely grateful that you're taking this journey toward becoming a top performer with me. And look, if you think that there's something that I can do to help you, please reach out. That's how I help people, right? A lot of times it's because I'm finding these people in everyday conversations or networking events or through referrals or whatever, but a lot of people raise their hands. And I do believe that I'm thinking about and approaching this kind of material differently than most people. And I believe that point of view can be valuable to either you or your entire organization. So if there is something you believe I can help you with, reach out, jb@jeffbajorek.com. Thanks again. I will be back with another episode and another chapter in this season very soon.
Rethink the Way You Sell is a Pod About It production. It's mixed and edited by Doug Branson, with music by Blue Dot Sessions and Doug Branson. This podcast is masterminded by Jeff Bajorek.